G'day everyone, Craig here. I'm here with Jason from New Zealand Certified Builders. I think we have an issue with mental health within the building industry, so today Jason and I are going to be chewing the fat about that.
Craig, tell us a bit about yourself.
So I'm born and bred Hamiltonian. When I finished high school, I went to Boys High and went on a gap year. That lasted 8 years. I lived in Scotland and South Africa, played professional sport in South Africa. Now I thought I'd better grow up and come home. So mid-20s I came home, back to Hamilton, and got a business and a house and thought I was set. But then things started changing a little bit within myself, and I thought, oh no, it's just a bit of a rut that I'm in. So when people talk about depression and things, I can honestly say I've been there.
Craig, in your view, does the building industry have a problem when it comes to depression, anxiety and mental health?
Yes, I do. I think New Zealand we have an issue, but especially in male-dominated industries like construction. I know construction well. I've been in it for 10 years or so, and I truly believe that yes, we do have an issue within construction around mental health and especially depression within males.
Okay. I noticed recently BRANZ did a scoping study on the industry and mental health. Talked to a lot of players in the industry, and they all agreed quite clearly that yes, something needs to be addressed here. Who's going to put their hand up is yet to be, discovered, but the ball has started rolling, identified we have a problem. And we have a problem particularly in the 35 to 45. It seems to be the bracket where particularly suicide in New Zealand is a real concern, and I think we can identify with that in the construction industry, where you're taking on businesses and a lot of pressure around the boom bust cycles. It's been highlighted that our sector has a higher rate than agriculture and forestry, which we would traditionally think of as male dominated, and sectors where they would be susceptible to depression simply because of the makeup and the players involved in those sectors. So yeah, absolutely, it's time to address it.
And to be honest, I think the numbers speak for itself. 668 people last year took their lives in New Zealand. 450 of that were males. So you talk about that 35 to 45 year age group, yes, there is that, but there's also just the high number of males taking their own lives. And then you look on top of that, 1 in 5 of us in New Zealand are going to be diagnosed with a mental illness in our lives.
Great, it's quite broad. So Craig, I've known you for some time now. You appear to be a straight up regular kind of guy. You've spent some years in a dark place. What was that world like for you during that time?
Whenever I get asked this question, I always answer the same way by saying that if Shortland Street were looking for a new lead actor, I would be walking in there, because that's all I was doing. I was just acting. I'd wake up my week would sort of go, I'd wake up on a Monday morning dreading working, and pretty much get out of the shower, have breakfast, step out that door, and from that moment on until 5 o'clock on Friday night, it was just a complete act. I'd pretend that I was well, I was pretending that I was happy and everything like that. No one knew actually the deep, dark despair, I guess you could call it, that I was going through. So it was, outwardly, people didn't realise anything was wrong. And I guess that's what depression's like. It's not something that you can see. Yeah. And it's an illness that picks on anyone, and anyone can be affected by it. So it's something that I just had to put on a show for the weeks, months, years that I was facing in that deep space.
Incredible. And during that phase for you, people talk about there's light at the end of the tunnel. There's always hope, and there's always this and always this ahead. For you though, during that time, was there light? Was there hope? Was there
No, nothing.
Way forward?
Nothing. I mean, people did say there'd be a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's sort of, people would say that, I'd be like, yeah, okay, I believe you, but inside there was just nothing. There wasn't even a pinprick of light at the end of that tunnel. There was absolutely nothing for me.
Amazing. So there must have been something that triggered a turnaround in your life, because here you are with us today, a totally different person. as far as your outward look on the world. What was that trigger for you?
It was a simple thing. It was an "Are you okay?" discussion. So taking it back to, I hit rock bottom on the 13th of March 2010, and I always say that's the day that my old life finished and my new life started, because it was a day that I realised that I actually needed more help than what I was getting. The only help I was getting was from Prozac at the time. So I hit rock bottom. That was the day that I was going to finish everything. That was the day I was going to take my own life. It was my mum's 60th. And I was that sick, I was that ill, that I thought that if I took myself out of their life, they would be more happy in the long run, sort of thing. But I guess that was the illness that took over me. My brother knew something was up, so he came around to my house, and it is an easy question, and he just said, "Are you okay?" And I guess that was the moment in time when I thought, actually I'm not. I actually do need more help. So from that point, that was when the ball started rolling to get me back to where I am today.
Wow. So that trigger point of there's two. I saw two trigger points there, that you hit rock bottom, you recognised that, and someone reached out and asked the question.
Yeah.
So how much of that road of recovery ahead of you was your own efforts versus the support of others around you?
I guess for me, there's that, or there still is, according to the study by BRANZ, the stigma attached to mental health. I didn't want to reach out. I didn't want to burden myself on anyone. I felt that I was being weak if I turned around and said, actually, I'm not well, I need help, and felt like that burden. And it was that whole burden, the whole weakness. It's that whole toughen up mentality that we always hear people talking about. And when I'm talking to people, mental health, it's like, well, if you've got a broken bone, what do? You go to a doctor. If you've got a broken mind, why don't you do the same thing? And I realised on that day that I'm not going to get through this by myself. So I took myself I didn't take myself, my parents persuaded me to go to counselling. And it's by far one of the best things I've ever done, helping me on that journey to back to where I am now.
Yeah. So Craig, you've been on quite a journey, and you're living proof that a regular person who suffers from anxiety and depression can move themselves forward. And you're also living proof that there are better days ahead, because you're here today with quite a large smile and you're looking in great shape. There's hope, and having good people around you sounds like part of that success. You got some comment around having people. Who do you put around you in that recovery?
It's definitely those nearest and dearest, the people that you care about, friends, family. But it's also knowing within yourself, being able to open up and talk. I know we talk a lot about "Are you okay?" discussions and things like that, but I don't know how many times you go and ask someone, "Are they okay?" They'll turn around 99 times out of 100, probably turn around and say, no, I'm actually am okay. But it's being, I guess, inward about this, and knowing that, I'm not okay. And knowing that there are places to turn to, people to talk to, that you can turn around and say, no, I'm not actually okay, I actually do need help.
So Craig, how are you feeling today?
I'm great. I am great. I know that I will have ups and downs. I always will.
Yep.
I'm predisposed to that. And the thing about the journey I've been on, realizations were that it's life. You have ups and downs. And I guess when I hit rock bottom, I thought life was against me, and I thought that it was only me that was going through this. But since I've been open and started talking to more and more people, it's like, wow, actually, there's so many people out there that have been through similar things. And I think that's what I'm talking about, it, making it open, making it, I guess, a water cooler type conversation. You talk about rugby, talk about weather, talk about this, talk about that. Let's talk about mental health in that way, and get that conversation into mainstream.
Great. As males in New Zealand, we're not good at identifying with depression and anxiety. So to understand where it might originate from is a real challenge, So Craig, have you got some comment on where does this stuff come from?
For sure. And it is my own personal view. There's the obvious place to start is that mental health depression is an illness. So there is that chemical imbalance within the brain. There's the other things as well. I know for me, one of my big reasons why I ended up where I was due to money issues within my business.
Okay.
Another thing is I know that every year between sort of June and August I'll have a down period. It's called SAD, it's seasonally affective disorder, so it's weather can affect you. Family issues family relationship issues, there could be bereavements, there's just day-to-day pressures and things like that of what's going on around you and how we cope. I mean, things can just keep piling up, and if you don't have a place to offload that, talk about it, or find something else to do, then that will all add to the depression, the anxiety and things like that, until I guess you get to a point where you end up, what else can you do? You end up in a dark hole like I did.
Sure. I guess a starting point to consider is, for each of us, is what are the indicators that those little triggers where actually something might be affecting you in some way. Something might become more like the seasonal thing, you know. I never considered that. I know for me, lack of sleep, things very quickly become more overwhelming, more troublesome. They can become bigger and badder just for the fact that my resilience is down, and that can grow during the week unless I stop and address and go, actually, I now need to get some body rest going on here.
For sure. I think one of the big things for me, and I know when I'm starting to slide into an episode, would be I get less pleasure out of things that I usually love doing. So playing sport and things like that. If I don't get as much pleasure out of that, I know, oh, there's something wrong here. If I'm making excuses not to do something, I know when going through my deep dark places, my parents would phone up and go, hey, why don't you come around for dinner? I'd be like, no, I'm going out with my mates. But my mates would phone up and say, why don't you come out with us? I'd be like, no, I'm going out for dinner. All the time I was sitting in my room doing nothing because I was too scared to step out and felt like I was being judged and things like that, I guess was the hardest thing.
Okay.
Depression is, not a weakness, it's an illness, is really dear to me because I spent 5 years thinking that all this stuff that was going on in my head was my weakness, that it was me. The anxiety, the crazy thoughts, but it was the illness. It wasn't because I wasn't good enough or because the thoughts that were in my head were actually realistic thoughts. It was the illness. I think if I had have realised that it was a illness earlier on, then I would have got treatment for it, like you should with any other illness. Like if it's an illness, the earlier you get any illness, the better you're going to be. And I know that if I hadn't have gone a bit earlier, then it wouldn't have wreaked so much havoc in my life. So that's, when I say it's an illness, it is an illness, like any other illness.
Depression. If it's a illness, not a weakness, Craig, what sort of next steps can we take?
I guess the steps I took were that knowing that, yep, I am depressed, and remembering it is an illness, it isn't a weakness, and taking yourself to a doctor and openly talking to them about how you're feeling and things like that. Yes, it's going to feel uncomfortable. It's not a conversation that us as males especially are pre-wired for being able to do. It is something that I found difficult, but I can now sit here 7-8 years later and talk about it openly. That first conversation I had was hard, and it probably took me a couple of times to be able to build up and tell the doctor exactly how I was feeling and the different triggers that it got me to that point, but also opening up to those closest to you and things like that. I mean, they care, they worry, and I guess sitting down with my parents and family a couple of years later, they sort of were able to tell me what they went through when I was depressed, because everything I was going through, I felt like I was a burden to them, but they were struggling as well, seeing me the way I was. So that's why we've got to try and normalise this and get people opening up and talking about it.
Point. That's an aspect we haven't talked about today, is the wider effect of family and friends who are affected indirectly or directly. You're right, that's another consideration.
I mean, I saw one of my flatmates what suicide did to his family. So I was the last person to speak to him, and the first time I met his parents was when they came and cleaned up his room, tidied up his room and things like that. And I saw, you just see it in the face, how broken they were because of what had happened. And he didn't open up, he didn't talk about it or anything like that. I mean, honestly, I can hand on heart say I didn't know that he was going through what he was. And that's the thing, you've just got to remember it can be anyone. It doesn't, depression is something that can strike anyone. The numbers prove it. 1 in 5 of us are going to be diagnosed with a mental illness. 678 people took their own lives last year, so it's numbers are starting to get scary.
So Craig, after seeking help, what were some of the coping mechanisms you discovered?
Yeah, so talking to the counsellor, she put me back into goal setting. It's something that I did in my early to late teens and things like that. When you're playing sport, you're trying to make different teams and things like that, so you're always trying to plan out the year and going, right, here's my goals for the year. So she put me back into goal setting and also getting structure back in my life. So even down to eating 3 square meals a day, having breakfast, lunch, dinner and things like that. But goal setting for me was huge. And it was all around that time when JK started coming out with his mental health adverts and saying physical activity can help. So I decided that if it can help an All Black great and a hero of mine, then why not try it out? So I bought a pair of shoes and started running. The first run, I mean, people have their swanky watches that tell them how long they run for and how far. I think I was able to judge by 2 or 3 lampposts that these runs aren't going to be fun or long or anything like that. But I carried that on and had on the fridge what my goals were. So it was 1K run, 2K run, 5K run, 10K run, then I ended up working up to a half marathon. And after that half marathon, I thought, well, heck, I'm starting to feel better again. Why don't I try something that I've never thought about before and set myself a BHAG or a big, hairy, audacious goal? And that was Ironman.
Wow, it's big, all right. Yes.
It certainly was. So I took on that, but the way I was able to do it was by setting those goals. You have that big goal that you're over, I called it my Everest, but you have all these little smaller goals that you chunk off, and every time you do, you start feeling better, and motivationally you're better. Everything, the outlook just started to look better. I started to enjoy life again.
Great. And I understand scientifically there is a relation between healing the mind and physical activity. The two go hand in hand, so I can 100% understand where you're coming from. That's great. So in signing off, Craig, have you got any messages for those who work in that team environment? How can we look after each other?
Have those "Are you okay" conversations. Look out for these people that you'll see that they start becoming withdrawn and things like that. Talk to them. Don't tell them what they should or shouldn't be feeling. Empathise with them. Never say that, I know exactly what you're going through, because everyone goes through depression differently. And we've just got to eradicate this whole harden up mentality. That's the biggest thing. It is an archaic way of thinking. We've proven it by BRANZ coming up with a study and things like that there is an issue within the construction industry, and we need to make a change, or else we're going to start seeing more and more people that don't believe that they can carry on, and 600 it's going to be 700 and so on and so forth. So we have to make a change, and that change has to happen now.
Let's start looking after each other. So Craig, I'd like to thank you for coming in today and sharing your experience with us. Through that we can identify there's hope and things, and we can put in place to plan and progress through depression and anxiety.
Well, thank you, Jason, for having a chat with me today. I guess I've talked about BHAGs. My BHAG, my Big Hero Audacious goal, is that my 1-year-old grows up in a world where it's not weak to speak, where we have open conversations about mental health, and us as blokes, we get rid of that harden up mentality and get rid of that from society and eradicate what mental health stigma there still is within New Zealand.
Now, one thing coaching teaches you is the importance of having a plan. You can have all the natural talent in the world on your team, but you've got to have tactics and strategies in place so no matter what happens, injuries, suspensions, you can stay on track. A good plan gives you freedom, and when everything hits the fan, you go back to the plan. For me, it seems to work kind of like that for depression. If you have a plan, you can cope with whatever life throws at you. At depression.org.nz, I can take you through a personalised program where you'll learn how putting together a simple plan can help you get through depression. Depression.org.nz. I'll see you there.